Welcome to Universal God Message of Peace, and this is our weekly Abrahamic dialogue. And I'm Lee Weissman, and I'm with Dr. Khalid Zaheer. And our subject has been, what do we have to give up to give God his due? Now, I got to speak last week, and so today we're going to give the floor over to Dr. Zaheer.
Thank you very much. I
Welcome.
begin in the name of the God, whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. You wanted to say something.
Nope, just listening.
Okay. So, what do we have to give up to give God his due? I think that there are two things which, if put together, will enable us humans to come anywhere close to giving God his due, although obviously we can never do it completely. What our Creator has done to us can never be paid back, but in our own very humble, ordinary capacity, uh, what we can do is uh, putting together two elements. One is understanding His plan and then doing what we can do to participate in implementing that plan. And in the process, we do make sacrifice, which is very important. However, I feel that both elements are important to be simultaneously pursued. Uh, because, while sacrifice gives um, spiritual contentment, um, intellectual appreciation of why it is being made, the sacrifice is being made, uh, gives us mental peace and clarity. And the two together, the way we have been designed, gives us a feeling that we are coming close to our Creator, and hopefully He's pleased with us. Even more significant, I think, is the fact that it can sometimes be really dangerous to give sacrifice a high status without intellectual scrutiny. Many religious fanatics uh, are full of passion for sacrifice, but their enthusiasm has made this world a much worse place than it would have been without them. So there's no dearth of sacrifice, but in the process, what they're doing is that they're causing a lot of harm, not just to peace of the world, but to the good name of God's message. So while it's important and it's absolutely undeniable that sacrifice is extremely significant, it has to be done in the light of the understanding that we have of our Creator's plan, His grand scheme. Uh, I think it's also important to appreciate that in order to please God, uh, one needs to sacrifice both worldly possessions as well as our opinions. It's a demand, I believe, on both one's intellectual inclinations as well as emotional attachments. So we our personality has both sides, both aspects with us. And when we are trying to please our creator, we are doing it, we are making attempts to pursue the goal uh, from both fronts. And the two are interrelated. Um, if you can't if you can't sacrifice your worldly possessions for the sake of the Almighty, you won't be able to you won't be able to uh, give up your views for His sake. And if you can't give up your mistaken, false views, uh, you can't sacrifice them, then your material sacrifice is going to be worthless, won't mean anything. So quite often it so happens that uh, we are attached to a certain understanding, a certain narrative, but it may not be correct, it may not be completely right. However, one has consumed so much of time and effort for that understanding that one is so strongly attached to it that one doesn't want to part with it. So, like, I mean, like our associations, attachments with our worldly possessions, and obviously the many of them we are attached emotionally to them. There are attachments to one's views as well. In in many aspects, many ways, it's true for all humans. Probably there's hardly any exception. We all have views, uh, many views, and all of them are all of them are impossible to be correct. But that's the pattern of life that has been given us to pursue, to follow. So during the course of our lives, we come across new, better views which make more sense. But many humans are not prepared to make sacrifice, sacrifice of their attachment to their views. And as a consequence, we we continue to stick to our guns. The fact of the matter is that all truth is from God, and it demands sacrifice of earlier attachments that we have uh, to be embraced by the Almighty's mercy, His kindness. Now, the most significant example is the example of the poverty that we see all around us. Helping the poor uh, has obviously one dimension wherein we make sacrifice of our own wealth, but it has an intellectual aspect as well, and that too is important. The intellectual, or call it religious aspect, understanding is that this life is a test. Our Creator, He arranged for some people to have more than others who have less. Most people make their efforts to earn. Some get more, others get less. Now, if one were to appreciate the design of life of the design that the Almighty has made, he just wants to see if people who have been left behind in the economic race are those who have been given more, not necessarily entirely because of their own efforts, but because God enabled them to have better opportunities. He gave them the kind of talent, abilities that were suited for the kind of efforts that would bear more fruits. So, this realization would make the individual uh, participate in the Almighty's project of enabling the poor, the less privileged, to be provided with the important provisions of life that would make them continue living decently. So, uh, understanding God's overall scheme helps in making sacrifice, and the sacrifice becomes meaningful, and it enables the one doing it, uh, enables him to feel that he's coming close to the Creator and probably paying back uh, a little that he deserved. Uh, the mention of Abraham's sacrifice is always going to be mentioned whenever uh, we talk about making sacrifice for the Almighty. Uh, as Rabbi Wiseman rightly pointed out, the important thing is that there was such a big, huge uh, sacrifice made, which to us ordinary mortals is unimaginable, uh, which brought Abraham so very close to the Almighty. Uh, I just want to mention the other possible understanding of the same story, uh, which I kind of intellectually understand what had happened, and I'll tell you, I'll mention why I'm saying it. Let me mention that first, because quite often when we talk about sacrifice and the supreme sacrifices made by the most outstanding of the humans, uh, and they are not, those sacrifices are not related to the the scheme of the Almighty, which I'm describing as the intellectual appreciation of what it actually was all about. Uh, it sometimes has its consequences. I mentioned about the consequences in the form of uh, religious fanatics doing what they sometimes do, imagining that they are making sacrifices to please their creator, but in the process, what they're doing is very unfortunate. There's a well-known writer, Karen Armstrong, who was at the beginning of her life when she was young. She was a Christian nun. Then she turned to writing, and she writes about religious matters. Very uh, a prolific writer. She came to Pakistan and you know addressed our our people, urging them to always be peace loving, reminding the people of Muslims of Pakistan that your religion stands for peace, and obviously it's a message that uh, we all needed, we still need very badly. So I knew that the person who had invited her and hosted her entire trip, he uh, mentioned to me that Karen is no more a religious person, uh, and she might be a she might be a, still be a believer in God, but she has given up on uh, the organized religion. And he mentioned that her reason, according to him, this gentleman, her reason is that she could not understand why God could ask his servant Abraham to sacrifice his son. Uh, I when I was in London, I went to meet her, and she was very kind to accommodate me and allow me to meet her at her residence. And I made an attempt to explain something that I thought might help her understand. I'm not too sure whether I was able to do it properly or not, or whether it made any sense to her or not. Her response was uh, that what you said is interesting, but let me say what I said to her. Now, and this is obviously has to be a slightly different approach towards the same story. Uh, from our perspective, the Muslim perspective, uh, obviously it was Ishmael who was sacrificed, and the Almighty is saying, as is mentioned in Genesis, that you sacrifice, O Abraham, you sacrifice your only son, and go to the land of Moriah. Uh, so the understanding is that the Almighty, after the house of God, which we call Bethullah, and we believe that it's the Bethel, the house of God, it needed somebody to serve it, to take care of it. And God asked Abram that it has to be your son. So, when you see something in dream, uh, particularly the dreams of the prophets, they are real. They are God's way of communicating with them, one way of communicating with them. So the message to him was that you sacrifice your son, which really means that uh, you will give up all your ambitions, plans about him. Uh, you you've got your son and the next son after you know you had gone past the age when normally people have sons. So you cannot have any of your own plans for him. He will have to be sacrificed, that is metaphorically sacrificed, to remain in this place of wilderness where my house has been created. So you have to do it. So this is what he saw in his dream. And both the father and the son, they agreed that this sacrifice is going to be made, and they agreed upon the literal understanding of what was seen in the dream. Uh, that literal understanding uh, could not, obviously, could not uh, come to its conclusion the way it was planned, because it was never a part of the Almighty's plan to actually ask a father to sacrifice his son. It was a symbolic message given to him to make him serve his house exclusively and not get involved in anything else. So that sacrifice was made, and obviously it became clear that it wasn't it wasn't understood in the literal sense. So what I'm saying is that You know, it's in the design of this life, the way the Almighty has created us, that this life is never going to be fair. It's never going to have all the elements of justice that one imagines there should be in life. And it has been done purposely to ensure that people contribute their uh, their bit in enabling as much justice to take place as is possible. In the process, they understand the Almighty's design, and in the process, they sacrifice and and are able to come closer to the Almighty. I'll just repeat at the end that if the understanding part of uh, the idea of making sacrifice is taken away, then we have already seen uh, many people doing things which are completely unacceptable and doing it apparently uh, from their point of view in a way that they are making sacrifice, but that is not what the will of the Almighty is. That is what I have to say. Thanks for your patience.
It required no patience whatsoever. It's fascinating. Um, One of the things you said in the very beginning, I didn't want to forget it. uh, Talk about, what we owe God is really unlimited. I think that I I would say all of Jewish all of Judaism is really based on the idea of gratitude, right? Ultimately, everything that exists in the world is given to us by God, right? We didn't earn anything really, and and God had no reason to create a world and to create us, and He doesn't need us and doesn't need this world. And so everything is an act of generosity, right? Everything that God does is an act of generosity. And so everything that we have ever experienced, individually, collectively, and in every moment is a free gift. And so we have an endless we have an endless bill, so to speak. So we're never really going to pay what we owe. No matter, the the gratitude, the need for gratitude is so great that maybe it can never be fulfilled. Um, but you're right, we have the opportunity to fulfill with our material things, but more importantly, and I think you're really right about this, is with our ideas. I forget who said it to me. Some I was once I was once very attached to an idea. Okay? I was very attached to an idea. And I kept kind of going over it again and again and again. And the person turned to me and said, "Just for once, could you not believe everything you think?" Just- And it was like, because I had taken this thing that I think and I had made it into this unmovable thing. And the truth is, it was wrong. And very often, the things that stand between us and God, are things that we just, refuse. Um, the things that we refuse to move. Um, I, I was thinking about the Karen Armstrong thing. First of all, I'm very surprised. I guess I'm not. I am surprised. Okay, first, I'm surprised I didn't know that she had been a nun. Second, that which is interesting. Second, I I guess I never. I was in kind of the academic religion business. That's where I did my graduate work. And in general, it was true that people who studied religion academically tended not to be conventionally religious, right? They tended not to sort of think of themselves as being this or that, and that was generally true. I had a feeling that would not be true about her, judging from her writing, but okay, I kind of get it. What I like about your solution, and I don't know if this is what she found interesting, but it's what I find interesting, is that the ultimate message, and I think it's, and I, now that I think about it, it's the ultimate message of the Jewish version too, is that you shouldn't make the mistake that dying for God is more important than living for God. It's because the logic is, right, is that he thinks, okay, I'm gonna sacrifice my son. That is that to give up life, that's really what God wants ultimately. And what the message is in the end is no, I don't want you to give up life. Okay? I want you to use life as part of my plan. I want you to use what you have, to use your life as part of what I'm trying to do in this world. That's a very powerful message, and I think really an important these days. We can we can look if we look at the history of the Abrahamic religions, right, this idea of self-sacrifice has come up again and again and again, and in some of the most perverse ways, honestly, in some really perverse ways. And um, and I think that we have to remember that we're really called to live for God, right? It's not to give up our lives for God. And that's much harder because honestly, to give up your life for God takes about 2 seconds. It doesn't really take a long time. Okay? If you want to sacrifice yourself, okay, you can sacrifice yourself in a few seconds. But to live for God, that takes a lot more and involves a lot more sacrifice. The person that, the people who think that they've, sacrificed something because they sacrificed their lives, okay. But try doing that for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Okay, it's much more difficult. I think that I think that's a really important message. I mean, ultimately, I think everything, everything we do is a giving up of something, even if it's our own breath, right? Even if it's our breath, it's our energy, it's our money, it's um, whatever it is, of course, whatever it is that we give to God, something that God already gave to us. We have nothing to give him but what he's already given us. Um, so thank you so much. And I'm sorry Dr. Lale is not here.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll be back and she'll be with us again next week. And and closing thoughts.
Well, let me say this, and I hope that what's there in my mind and what you very rightly and kindly endorsed is what's going to guide us to the next sessions as well. And that's for the whole purpose of us talking to each other is that I have a feeling that um, I can't say most, but many devout religious people have this limitation of not being able to talk quite as openly as one would like people who are ready to sacrifice for their creator should.
Mhm.
So, this discussion of realities, God's plan from different perspectives is an important project. Uh, it must continue because, you know, when people are divided religiously, uh, it does create an impression that probably these are views, personal views of different groups. I am perfectly convinced that it's only when God's prophets come and they're physically present that they are able to make things absolutely clear. But I'm equally convinced that even in their absence, things can be much better than what they are right now.
For sure.
Yeah.
for sure.
There, this effort must continue.
Yeah, the effort to figure it out. There's not, you don't get, we say, it's not necessarily up to you to complete the work, but you don't get to give it up either. Are you going to be able
Absolutely.
to figure everything out perfectly? No. Do we have prophets we can ask the question of? No. But we were given, thank God, we were given seichel, we've been given akal, who have minds. Okay, we have minds,
Yeah.
and it's a sin maybe not to use them, and to use them to try to understand what this world is for. So, thank you for joining me in that
Thank you.
process, and
Thank you very
it's
much.
it's good to have a good partner, and Be'ezrat Hashem, please God, we'll get to drink tea together soon. I'm not visiting you in Canada during the winter. Just saying, okay, wait till spring, because nobody should live in Canada during the winter. That's all I can say.
Absolutely.
You people are crazy. That's all I can say. But in any case, other than that, it's a good time to be a Canadian. So, okay, I'll see you. I'll see you, inshallah, next week.
Inshallah. Thank you
Bye.
very much. Thank you.